The conference room fell silent as Ambassador Henry Brooks read through the document one final time. Around him sat representatives from 47 different species, each one watching with careful eyes. Some had multiple eyes. Some had sensors that served the same purpose. All of them waited for the human to sign away his species' right to defend themselves properly. Henry had been a soldier once, back when Earth still thought it was alone in the universe. He had commanded fleets during the brief but bloody encounter with the Kryn swarm, those insect-like raiders who had stumbled into human space looking for easy prey. They had found something else entirely. Humans had torn through their ships with improvised weapons and tactics that no sane species would attempt. Boarding actions, ramming maneuvers. One captain had actually vented his own ship's atmosphere to put out fires, while his crew fought in vacuum suits. The galaxy had watched in horror. Now, 15 years later, humanity sat at this table not as conquerors but as supplicants. The Galactic Council had made their position clear. Join us and accept limitations, or stay isolated forever. Earth needed the technology, the trade routes, and the protection that Council membership offered. Humanity had expanded to 12 colony worlds, but they were vulnerable, alone. "The terms are quite generous," said Speaker Talmuth, his crystalline body refracting light in unsettling patterns. The Luminth species had controlled the Council for 3 centuries. They viewed newer species with the patience of immortals and the condescension of those who had never truly been challenged. You retain rights to defensive stations around your core worlds, personal defense forces for anti-piracy operations, even armed planetary militias. Henry looked up from the document, but no warships, no dedicated military vessels of any kind, no weapons platforms in deep space, no battle stations. Precisely, Talmuth's voice resonated like wind chimes. Your species has demonstrated remarkable aggression. We simply cannot allow unrestricted military expansion. Surely you understand. Across the table, Ambassador Chitros clicked her mandibles in agreement. The insectoid species had lost 3 exploration vessels to the Kryn before humans arrived. When humans had destroyed 17 Kryn warships in a single engagement, the Chitros had celebrated. Then they had watched the combat recordings and stopped celebrating. Humans did not fight like civilized species. They fought like cornered animals with the intelligence to make that terrifying. "What if we are attacked?" Henry asked, though he already knew the answer. "The Council will dispatch peacekeeping forces," Talmuth replied smoothly. "You will be protected under our mutual defense protocols. All member species benefit from collective security." Henry thought about the response time for those peacekeeping forces. Weeks, most likely. Maybe months if the Council needed to debate whether the threat was genuine. His colonies would be ash by then. But he also knew the alternative. Isolation meant no access to faster-than-light communication networks, no trade in advanced materials, no medical exchanges that had already saved millions of lives on Earth. Humanity would stagnate while the rest of the galaxy moved forward. "I need to consult with my government," Henry said. "Of course," Talmuth gestured with one crystalline appendage. "You have 6 standard hours. The Council will reconvene then." The room emptied slowly. Species who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years filed out in clusters, speaking in languages humans were still learning. Henry remained seated, staring at the document. 73 pages of restrictions, limitations, and carefully worded clauses that all meant the same thing. Humans could not be trusted with real military power. His personal communicator buzzed. "Secure channel." Henry activated the privacy field around his seat and accepted the call. Admiral Rebecca Cross appeared in hologram form, her lined face showing the stress of the past 2 weeks. She commanded Earth's home fleet, the collection of warships that currently protected humanity's core systems. Under this treaty, those ships would need to be decommissioned or converted to non-military purposes within 5 years. "They are not budging on any points," Henry said quietly. Rebecca nodded. We expected that. The analysts have been going through the treaty language, every clause, every subsection, every definition. And it is airtight for what it prohibits: warships, military vessels, weapons platforms, battle stations. They defined all of those terms very carefully. Rebecca leaned forward. But Henry, they also left gaps, large ones. Henry felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe, or the old tactical instincts waking up. Explain. A warship is defined as any vessel whose primary purpose is combat operations. Primary purpose. That means if a ship has a legitimate civilian function as its primary purpose, it is not a warship under the treaty. They will never accept that interpretation. They do not have to accept it. They just have to not be able to prove otherwise. Rebecca's expression hardened. We build mining vessels with reinforced hulls for asteroid operations, research ships with powerful sensors and communication arrays, colony transports with heavy engines and point defense systems for debris, emergency response vessels with weapons for clearing space junk. Henry began to understand. None of those are warships. Not under their own definitions. And Henry, we can build them big. We can build them tough. We can build them with modular designs that serve civilian purposes but can be rapidly reconfigured if needed. The Council will see through it eventually. Eventually is not immediately. By the time they realize what we have done, we will have a fleet of civilian vessels that just happens to be able to defend human space more effectively than our current military ships. Rebecca smiled grimly. They wanted to restrict our warships. Fine, we will not build any warships. Henry looked at the treaty again, seeing it with new eyes. The restrictions were clear. The definitions were precise, but precision cut both ways and lawyers could find spaces between the clearest words. Sign it, Rebecca said. Give them what they want. Let them think they have contained the dangerous humans. Then we build our way around every single restriction. 6 hours later, Henry Brooks returned to the council chamber. Speaker Talmuth and the other representatives waited with barely concealed satisfaction. The dangerous species would be muzzled. Order would be maintained. Henry picked up the signing stylus, paused for just a moment, then put his name on the treaty. The council members relaxed visibly. Some even made gestures of celebration in their various ways. Ambassador Brooks gathered his documents and prepared to leave. As he reached the door, he turned back to face the assembled council. "Thank you for this opportunity," he said with perfect diplomatic courtesy. "Humanity looks forward to a long and productive relationship with the Galactic Council." What he did not say, what he kept locked behind his professional smile, was the message he would send to Earth the moment he reached his ship. Find the loopholes, build what they cannot stop, show them that restricting human creativity only makes it more dangerous. The treaty was signed. The real work was about to begin. Diana Webb stared at the holographic projection rotating slowly above her desk, watching the elegant curves of the ship design shift and reform with each adjustment. Outside her office window, Earth's orbital construction yards stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with vessels in various stages of completion. Most were actual civilian ships, simple cargo haulers and passenger transports, but the ship on her screen was something else entirely. 2 years had passed since the treaty signing. 2 years of careful planning, legal review, and creative engineering. Diana had assembled a team of the best aerospace designers humanity had to offer, along with a small army of lawyers who specialized in finding creative interpretations of restrictive contracts. "The council inspector arrives in 3 hours," said Robert Kim, entering the office without knocking. The CEO of Frontier Industries had made his fortune in asteroid mining before the Galactic Council even knew Earth existed. Now he was betting that fortune on Diana's designs. "Please tell me we are ready." Diana gestured at the hologram. The Frontier-class deep space mining vessel, designed for operations in asteroid belts and debris fields, reinforced hull plating to withstand impacts from space rocks, powerful engines for rapid repositioning between mining sites, advanced sensor arrays for identifying valuable mineral deposits, point defense lasers for vaporizing small debris that might damage equipment. Robert studied the design. To an untrained eye, it looked like exactly what Diana described, a large industrial vessel built for harsh conditions. And the other capabilities. Diana smiled and switched the hologram to a different mode. The same ship appeared, but now overlay graphics showed the real specifications. The reinforced hull plating was military-grade armor, thick enough to shrug off hits from most Council weapons. The powerful engines could push the ship to acceleration rates that matched or exceeded most warships. The sensor arrays were sophisticated enough to track targets across millions of kilometers. The point defense lasers could vaporize debris, certainly, but they could also shred incoming missiles or cut through light armor. Every single system has a legitimate civilian purpose, Diana said. The cargo bays are modular and can be reconfigured for different mining operations. They can also be reconfigured to hold marines, fighters, or additional weapon systems. The manufacturing facilities for processing ore can be retooled to produce ammunition. The crew quarters accommodate 400 people because mining operations need lots of workers, not because we designed it to hold a full combat complement. What about weapons? Robert asked. Diana pulled up another schematic. The main mining laser is designed to cut through solid rock and metal asteroids. It draws enormous power and can focus a beam hot enough to slice through almost anything. We also have rail gun systems for launching survey probes deep into asteroids. She paused. Those same rail guns can launch projectiles at targets with devastating accuracy. And the Council Inspector will approve this. Inspector Curiel is a Methodian. His species built their entire civilization on bureaucratic process and following regulations to the letter. He will review our documentation, verify that every system serves a stated civilian purpose, and confirm that we are building mining vessels, not warships. Diana's expression hardened. Because we are building mining vessels that can fight better than most military ships in the galaxy, but mining vessels nonetheless. 3 hours later, Inspector Curiel arrived at the construction yards. The Methodian stood nearly 3 meters tall, his gray skin marked with ritual scars that indicated his rank in the bureaucratic hierarchy. He carried a data tablet and an expression of profound boredom. Diana and Robert met him in the main observation gallery overlooking the construction bay. Below them, the first Frontier-class vessel was taking shape, its massive frame being assembled by automated construction drones and human workers in powered suits. "I have reviewed your initial documentation," Curiel said, his voice flat and mechanical. "The design appears compliant with treaty restrictions, no military designation, no prohibited weapons systems, primary function clearly established as resource extraction." "We appreciate the Council's thorough review process," Robert said with practiced diplomacy. Curiel pulled up specifications on his tablet. "The armor plating seems excessive for civilian operations." Diana was ready for this. Asteroid mining is incredibly dangerous. Our crews will be working in fields of high-velocity debris, with rocks ranging from pebble size to kilometers across. We need protection that can handle unexpected impacts. Would the Council prefer we risk our workers' lives to save on construction costs? The inspector made a notation. Acceptable reasoning, the weapons systems, debris clearance and survey equipment, all standard for deep space mining operations in hazardous environments. Curiel spent the next 2 hours reviewing every system, every specification, every detail of the ship's design. He questioned power outputs, crew capacity, sensor range, and a dozen other elements. Diana and her team had prepared answers for all of it. Every unusual feature had a civilian justification. Every enhanced capability served a legitimate purpose. Finally, Curiel lowered his tablet. The design is compliant with all treaty restrictions. You may proceed with construction. Robert maintained his neutral expression, but Diana saw the tension leave his shoulders. Thank you, Inspector. We have 49 more vessels in this class planned for construction over the next 18 months. 50 mining ships. Curiel's expression did not change, but something in his tone suggested surprise. That is a significant investment in resource extraction. Humanity has expensive tastes, Robert replied smoothly, and the asteroid belts in our territory are rich with valuable materials. We intend to become major suppliers of rare elements to council markets. After Curiel departed, Diana and Robert stood in silence, watching the construction continue below. Workers swarmed over the ship's frame like ants, each one knowing they were building something that would change humanity's position in the galaxy. He knew, Diana said quietly. I saw it in his eyes at the end. He knew exactly what we are building. But he cannot prove it, Robert replied. And more importantly, he cannot stop it. The treaty is clear. These are not warships. Diana thought about the 50 vessels that would be completed in the coming months. 50 ships that could serve as the core of a defensive fleet. 50 ships that would protect human colonies while technically violating no laws. And this was just the beginning. Her team already had designs for larger vessels. Deep space research ships that could serve as carriers. Colony transports that could deploy troops and equipment to planetary surfaces. Emergency response vessels that could move with the speed and precision of military frigates. The Council had wanted to prevent humanity from building a war fleet. They had succeeded. Humanity would not build a war fleet. They would build something better, something the Council could not challenge without admitting their treaty had been poorly written, something that would keep human space safe without giving the galaxy's older species any legal grounds for complaint. Start the next phase, Diana said. I want designs for the carrier class ready for review in 3 months. Robert nodded and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold. You know they will figure it out eventually. Yes, Diana agreed. But by then we will have hundreds of ships in service, all completely legal, all protecting our people. Let them figure it out. Let them try to write new restrictions. We will find the loopholes in those too. She turned back to the window, watching humanity's future take shape in steel and composite armor. The galaxy had underestimated humans before. They were about to make that mistake again. The asteroid field designated as Site Theta-9 contained enough platinum and rare earth elements to fund 3 new colony worlds. At least, that was what the surveys claimed. Anne Rivers had her doubts about the surveys, but she kept those doubts to herself as she reviewed the sensor data on her command display. Technically, she was not a captain. The Perseverance was registered as a civilian mining vessel, and she was its chief operations manager. The fact that she had commanded destroyers for 12 years before the treaty went into effect was just a coincidence. So was the fact that her entire crew of 380 people were all former military personnel who had received excellent severance packages and immediate employment with frontier industries. Mineral composition scan complete, reported Paul Grant from the sensor station. His official title was Mining Survey Specialist. His actual specialty involved weapon targeting and threat assessment, skills he had developed during 8 years as a fire control officer on Earth's defense platforms. Anne glanced at the data. Mark the high-yield asteroids for processing. Deploy the collection drones. Around the Perseverance, smaller automated craft detached from the ship's cargo bays and moved into the asteroid field. They began the slow work of attaching to selected rocks, preparing them for extraction. It was genuinely productive work. The ship would actually mine valuable materials from this field, but mining was not why they were really here. Contact, Paul said suddenly, his casual tone vanishing. multiple vessels emerging from FTL. Vector suggests Kryn origin. Anne felt her pulse quicken but kept her voice steady. How many? 4 ships, Raider class based on the signatures. They are spreading out trying to surround us. The Kryn swarm had fractured after their defeat 15 years ago. Most had withdrawn to their core territories and avoided human space. But splinter groups still prowled the frontier regions, attacking isolated targets. Officially, the swarm claimed no connection to these pirates. Unofficially, everyone knew the raiders operated with tacit approval from the Kryn leadership. Open a channel, Anne ordered. This is civilian mining vessel Perseverance. We are conducting legal resource extraction operations. Please state your intentions. The response came quickly, translated by the ship's computer. Human vessel, you will shut down your engines and prepare to transfer all valuable materials. Resistance will result in destruction. Paul looked at Anne. They think we are helpless. Let them think that for another minute, Anne replied. Charge the debris defense system. Bring the emergency maneuvering thrusters online. Activate armor plating protocols. Around the bridge, her crew moved with practiced efficiency. Whatever their official job titles claimed, these people knew how to prepare for combat. The ship systems began transforming from mining configuration to combat readiness. Panels slid open to reveal weapon ports. Armor plating rotated into defensive positions. Sensor arrays refocused from mineral detection to threat tracking. Ready in 30 seconds, Paul reported. Anne watched the Kryn ships closing in. 4 against 1 seemed like good odds to them. After all, they were military vessels facing a civilian mining ship. The Perseverance was large and ungainly, clearly built for industrial work rather than combat. Its crew was probably terrified, trying to figure out how to comply with the pirates' demands. 15 seconds, Paul counted down. 10, 5. All hands brace for combat maneuvers, Anne announced. Then to Paul, light them up. The Perseverance transformed in an instant. What had appeared to be a slow, vulnerable mining ship suddenly became something very different. The main laser, designed for cutting through solid asteroids, locked onto the nearest Kryn vessel and fired. The beam was intended to slice through rock and metal over the course of hours. Against the relatively thin armor of a raider ship, it was devastating. The Kryn vessel's shields flared, held for perhaps 2 seconds, then collapsed. The laser cut through the hull like a blade through paper. The ship split in half, its reactor containment failing in a brief flash of light. Target destroyed, Paul reported, already tracking the next ship. The rail gun spoke next, launching projectiles at velocities that made them nearly impossible to dodge. Survey probes made excellent kinetic weapons when accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The second Kryn ship tried to evade but was too slow. 3 impacts struck its engine section, and the vessel went tumbling through space, dead in the water. The remaining 2 raiders finally realized they were not facing a helpless civilian target. They broke formation, trying to retreat, but the Perseverance had been built with engines powerful enough to move the ship rapidly between mining sites. Those same engines now pushed the vessel forward in pursuit. Target lock on number 3, Paul said. Point defense systems engaging. The smaller laser arrays, designed for vaporizing debris that might damage mining equipment, tracked the fleeing ship and opened fire. Dozens of focused beams found their target, overwhelming the shields and burning through the hull. The ship's life support failed, and the crew had perhaps 30 seconds to reach escape pods before atmosphere vented completely. The 4th ship was already charging its FTL drive, desperate to escape. Anne considered letting it go, then changed her mind. Better to send a message. Rail guns, one shot, disabled their drive. Paul made a minute adjustment to his targeting solution and fired. The projectile crossed the distance in less than 2 seconds and impacted exactly where the Kryn ship's FTL drive was located. The ship survived, but it was not going anywhere fast. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Anne ordered. "This is Perseverance. We will not be attacked while conducting legitimate mining operations. Any vessel approaching with hostile intent will be defended against. We recommend you inform your friends." She cut the channel and surveyed the aftermath. One raider destroyed, one disabled and drifting, one with failed life support, and one stranded with no FTL capability. The whole engagement had lasted less than 3 minutes. "Damage report," Anne said. "None," Paul replied. "They never got a shot off." Anne allowed herself a small smile. Then her expression sobered as she noticed something on the long-range sensors. "What is that?" Paul enhanced the image. "Observer drone, Council design. It has been watching the whole time." Of course it had. The Council always had observers near human operations, especially this far out. They would have detailed recordings of the engagement, proof that a civilian mining vessel had just destroyed a Kryn raider group with minimal effort. "Send a message to Frontier Industries," Anne said. "Tell them to have the legal team ready. We are about to have visitors." 3 days later, a Council investigation ship arrived at Site Theta-9. The team was led by a Lumenth prosecutor who clearly expected to find evidence of treaty violations. Instead, they found a mining ship that had defended itself against pirates using systems that were all completely legal for civilian vessels. The mining laser, designed for cutting asteroids, the rail guns, survey probe launchers, the armor, protection against space debris, the sensors, mineral detection equipment, the crew, civilian contractors with whatever backgrounds they happened to have before taking these jobs. The prosecutor reviewed the data, interviewed the crew, and inspected every system on the ship. Anne cooperated fully, providing complete documentation for every piece of equipment. It was all legal, all compliant with the treaty, all exactly what it was supposed to be. When the investigation team finally departed, Anne knew they were frustrated but powerless. The Perseverance had not violated any restrictions. It had simply defended itself using available equipment. Back on Earth, Diana Webb received the combat recordings with satisfaction. The test had succeeded beyond expectations. A single civilian vessel had defeated 4 military ships without taking damage, and most importantly, the Council could do nothing about it. She pulled up the production schedule. 40 more Frontier-class vessels were under construction, and that was just the beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the 5th time in 2 months. Speaker Talmuth observed the assembled representatives with growing frustration as the chamber filled with arguing voices in dozens of languages. The translators struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations. "Order," Talmuth called, his crystalline form pulsing with light for attention. "We must address this situation systematically." Ambassador Chitros rose from her seat, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Systematically, the humans now have 500 warships operating throughout their territory, 500 vessels that can outgun our military craft." "They are not warships," corrected a human representative. Henry Brooks had retired 2 years ago, replaced by Ambassador Patricia Foster, a former judge who specialized in contract law. "They are civilian vessels engaged in legitimate commercial and scientific operations, all registered and documented according to treaty requirements." "A legal fiction," snapped Talmuth. "Your mining ships destroyed 4 Kryn raiders in under 3 minutes." Patricia smiled politely. "Those raiders attacked a civilian vessel conducting lawful operations. Our crew defended themselves using available equipment. Would the Council prefer that human civilians simply allow themselves to be killed by pirates?" The Verath delegates spoke up, their insected translator rendering their chemical signals into audible speech. "We have reviewed the human designs. They are ingenious. We are implementing similar approaches for our own commercial fleet." Talmuth turned sharply. "You are copying them." Of course, why should only humans benefit from creative engineering? Our merchant vessels now carry enhanced defensive systems, improved sensors, and reinforced structures, all for legitimate civilian purposes. The Varath delegate gestured with multiple limbs. We recommend other species do the same. The galaxy is clearly less safe than we believed. Around the chamber, representatives from a dozen species nodded in agreement. The humans had not just found loopholes in the treaty. They had demonstrated that those loopholes could be exploited by anyone with sufficient engineering creativity. This defeats the entire purpose of the military restrictions. Talmuth protested. We are witnessing an arms race disguised as civilian development. Then write better treaties, Patricia replied. The current agreement is very specific about what constitutes a warship. Our vessels do not meet those criteria. If the Council wishes to expand the restrictions, we are happy to discuss amendments. But any new treaty must apply equally to all species. That was the problem, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The Council could not write new restrictions that only applied to humans. Any changes to the treaty would need to cover all member species, and at least 20 species were now building enhanced civilian vessels using principles copied from human designs. They would never vote to restrict their own newfound capabilities. Talmuth watched 300 years of carefully maintained galactic order crumbling before his eyes. The military restrictions had kept newer species in check, prevented arms races, and maintained the dominance of older council members. Now that system was collapsing because one species had decided to be creative with legal definitions. We should move on to the border incident, suggested the Methodian representative, clearly eager to change the subject. The border incident had occurred 3 weeks ago, a dispute between human colonists and a Kryn military patrol over mining rights in a contested system. Both sides claimed legal authority. Tensions had escalated when the Kryn deployed 6 military vessels to enforce their claim. Then a human merchant convoy had arrived. 23 ships registered as cargo transports, colony supply vessels, and mobile repair facilities. The Kryn commander had dismissed them as irrelevant civilians. He had been badly mistaken. When the human convoy finished reconfiguring from transport mode to combat mode, the Kryn found themselves facing what amounted to a battle group. The cargo ships deployed fighter-sized repair drones that proved extremely effective at disabling enemy sensors. The colony supply vessels revealed point defense grids that could track and destroy incoming missiles with frightening accuracy. The mobile repair facilities turned out to have manufacturing capabilities that could produce ammunition in real time. No shots were fired. The Kryn commander was experienced enough to recognize when he was outmatched. His 6 military vessels faced 23 civilian ships that had somehow transformed into a coordinated combat force. He withdrew, claiming the system was not worth the resources to contest it. The Kryn Empire has filed a formal complaint, the Kryn representative said stiffly. Human vessels threatened our military forces. Our merchant vessels transported goods to a colony in disputed territory, Patricia countered. When confronted by Kryn warships, they prepared to defend themselves. Fortunately, violence was avoided. I would think the Council would celebrate this peaceful resolution. Peaceful? The Kryn representative's translator conveyed his incredulity. Your civilian fleet intimidated our military into retreat. We prefer the term deterrence. Surely the Council supports the principle that strong defensive capabilities prevent conflict. Talmuth wanted to argue, but he knew it was useless. The humans had fundamentally changed the equation. They had built a fleet that could defend their territory, intimidate potential aggressors, and support their colonies, all while technically violating no treaty restrictions. Worse, they had shared their approach with other species, creating a wave of civilian fleet building that was reshaping galactic power dynamics. There is another matter, said Patricia, as if discussing the weather. We have begun construction on a new class of vessel, deep space research and colony establishment ships, quite large actually. The first one should be operational in about 8 months. How large? Talmuth asked warily. Approximately 12 kilometers long. We are calling her the Indomitable. She will carry extensive scientific equipment, terraforming systems, and enough supplies to establish a major colony on any habitable world. Patricia pulled up a holographic image of the ship design. We have filed all the proper documentation with the Council Registration Office. Talmuth stared at the image. 12 kilometers. The largest military dreadnought in the Council fleet measured 3 kilometers, and this monstrosity was registered as a civilian colony ship. That is not a colony ship, he said quietly. Of course it is. What else would it be? Patricia's expression was innocent. We are not building any warships, Speaker Talmuth. The treaty is very clear on that point. We follow the law. After the session ended, Talmuth remained in the empty chamber. Around him, the holographic displays showed human civilian vessels operating throughout their territory and beyond. 500 ships at last count, with more being built every month. Each one technically legal. Each one capable of fighting better than most Council military vessels. And now they were building something the size of a small moon, calling it a colony ship. The Luminth had ruled the Council for 3 centuries through careful management of military power. They had written the treaties that kept younger species under control. They had created the frameworks that maintained order. The humans had turned those same frameworks against them, finding freedom in the very restrictions meant to contain them. Talmuth dimmed his luminescence, a gesture of resignation among his species. The galaxy was changing, and he had helped create the very tool that was changing it. Jupiter's orbit had always been a busy place, with mining operations harvesting the gas giant's moons and ice processing facilities extracting water for the inner colonies. But now the orbit held something else, something that made even veteran spacers stop and stare when they first saw it on their sensors. The Indomitable floated in the darkness like a small moon that had decided to become a ship. 12 kilometers of human engineering, built in sections over 18 months in a construction facility that had been hidden behind Jupiter's magnetosphere. The ship's official designation was Deep Space Colony Establishment and Terraforming Vessel, registration number DCETV001. Diana Webb stood in the main observation gallery, watching the final assembly crews attach the last external modules. She had designed hundreds of ships in her career, but this one was different. This one was a statement, a declaration that humanity would not be contained by treaty language or council expectations. "We are receiving the inspection delegation in 1 hour," said Robert Kim, joining her at the window. His company had invested heavily in the Indomitable project, along with 6 other corporations and covert funding from Earth's government. Inspector Curiel is leading the team personally. "Of course he is," Diana replied. "The Council is terrified of what we have built." Curiel arrived with 12 other inspectors representing different species. Diana met them in the docking bay, where the scale of the ship became immediately apparent. The bay could hold 50 smaller vessels, currently containing a mix of shuttles, survey craft, and cargo transports, all civilian, naturally. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," Diana said. "We are excited to show you our newest achievement in colony support technology." Curiel had reviewed the documentation already. Diana could see it in his expression. The Methodian inspector had spent 3 years watching humans exploit treaty loopholes, and he knew exactly what he was looking at. But knowing and proving were different things. The tour took 6 hours. Diana showed them everything. The environmental processing systems, which could transform a hostile atmosphere into breathable air for human colonists. They were also powerful enough to generate shield bubbles around the entire ship, dense enough to stop most weapons fire. But their primary purpose was terraforming, so they were perfectly legal. The navigation and sensor arrays, which could map entire star systems and track thousands of objects simultaneously, useful for finding suitable colony sites and avoiding hazards, also useful for coordinating fleet movements and tracking enemy vessels across millions of kilometers. The manufacturing facilities, which could process raw materials and produce everything a new colony might need, tools, construction equipment, basic machinery, and if necessary, ammunition, spare parts for weapons systems and replacement drones. The power generation systems, which could provide energy for an entire colony city, or power weapons that could crack planets. The crew quarters, designed for 50,000 colonists making the long journey to a new world. 50,000 people who could, if needed, serve as Marines. Pilots, engineers, and support personnel for the largest mobile military platform ever built. The weapon systems, Curiel finally said, his tone flat. Please explain the weapon systems. Diana pulled up a holographic schematic. The Indomitable is designed to operate in deep space, often in regions with significant debris fields. We have extensive point defense laser arrays for destroying objects that might damage the hull. We also have kinetic mass drivers for adjusting the orbits of asteroids that might threaten colony sites. These systems could destroy warships. They could destroy anything, I suppose, but their designed purpose is debris clearance and orbital adjustment for terraforming operations. Diana met his eyes. Inspector, if you build a ship this large and send it into unexplored space, you need systems powerful enough to handle any hazard. Would the Council prefer we send colonists into danger without adequate protection? The other inspectors murmured among themselves. Diana watched their reactions carefully. Some were impressed by the engineering. Some were clearly nervous about the implications, but none of them could point to any system that violated the treaty. Because every system on the ship had a legitimate civilian purpose. The fact that those systems could also function as military equipment was simply good design efficiency. The crew capacity seems excessive, noted a Chitros inspector. Colony establishment requires significant labor. Construction workers, engineers, agricultural specialists, medical personnel, educators, administrators. 50,000 people is the minimum for establishing a self-sufficient settlement on a new world. And if those 50,000 people happen to have military training? Diana shrugged. We recruit from the available population. Many humans have military experience. We do not discriminate in hearing based on previous employment. The inspection continued through the ship's massive interior. They saw the hydroponic bays that could feed the crew during long voyages, the medical facilities that rivaled major hospitals, the communication systems that could coordinate operations across light years, the cargo holds that could carry everything needed to build a city from scratch. Every single feature had been designed with dual purpose in mind. Everything served a colony mission. Everything also served a military function. Finally, Curiel requested a private meeting with Diana in one of the conference rooms. The other inspectors were dismissed, leaving the two of them alone. I know what this ship is, Curiel said quietly. I have known since the first day I reviewed the plans. This vessel could defeat most military fleets in the galaxy. It is a colony ship, Diana replied calmly. It is a weapon. A planet-killing, fleet-destroying weapon that you have disguised as civilian infrastructure. Diana leaned forward. Inspector, let me be very clear. This ship is exactly what its documentation claims. It is designed to carry colonists to distant worlds and provide them with everything they need to survive and thrive. Every system on board serves that purpose. And if war comes, then our colonists will have excellent protection. Diana's expression hardened. The Council forced this situation. You restricted our military because you feared human aggression. So we built civilian vessels that can defend our people without violating your restrictions. Did you expect us to simply accept vulnerability?" Kuril was silent for a long moment. Then he stood. "I will file my report. The Indomitable is compliant with all treaty restrictions. I see no violations." "Thank you, Inspector." "Do not thank me." Kuril turned at the door. "I am a bureaucrat and I follow the law, but I am not blind. You have built something that changes everything. When the Council realizes what this ship represents, there will be consequences." After he left, Diana returned to the observation gallery. Below her, the Indomitable stretched away in both directions, a massive achievement of human determination and ingenuity. 2 months later, the ship completed its trials. The results exceeded every expectation. The Indomitable could move faster than ships 1/10 its size. Its sensors could detect threats before most vessels even knew danger was near. Its defensive systems could shrug off attacks that would destroy conventional warships, and its offensive capabilities were simply unprecedented. And it was all completely legal. Diana stood on the bridge as Anne Rivers took command. The former destroyer captain had been promoted to oversee the Indomitable, though her official title was Expedition Coordinator. "Take us out," Anne ordered. "Let us show the galaxy what humanity can build." The Indomitable moved away from Jupiter, engines burning bright enough to be seen from Earth. Destination: the outer colonies, where its presence would ensure no one ever threatened human settlements again. The Council watched, powerless to stop it, bound by their own laws. The Verath home system burned. Across 3 worlds, cities fell to Kryn bombardment. The insectoid Verath had been peaceful traders for centuries, maintaining minimal military forces and relying on Council protection. That protection had not arrived. The Council fleet was still debating jurisdictional issues and threat assessment protocols, while the Kryn swarm poured through Verath space like a plague. Ambassador Patricia Foster watched the live feeds in the Council emergency session with barely contained fury. Ships destroyed. Colonies evacuated under fire. Millions of Verath refugees fleeing deeper into Council territory. "The peacekeeping fleet will arrive in 48 hours, Speaker Talmuth announced. "We are mobilizing forces from 6 different sectors." 48 hours, Patricia said coldly. "In 48 hours the Verath species will be extinct. The Kryn are not raiding. This is total war. We are moving as quickly as protocols allow." "Then your protocols are worthless." Patricia stood. "I am authorized to make the following offer. The human civilian fleet currently operating near the border can reach Verath space in 12 hours. We volunteer for immediate humanitarian rescue operations." The chamber erupted in argument. Half the delegates supported immediate action. The other half worried about setting precedents and the implications of allowing human ships into another species' territory. While they argued, Patricia sent a coded message to the human fleet. 300 civilian vessels, including the Indomitable, were already moving into position. They had been waiting for authorization, but authorization was taking too long. Sometimes you asked forgiveness instead of permission. 12 hours later, the human fleet emerged from FTL at the edge of Verath space. Anne Rivers stood on the Indomitable's bridge watching sensor data pour in. The situation was worse than the reports suggested. 70 Kryn warships were systematically destroying Verath infrastructure. Orbital stations burned. Planetary defenses had collapsed. The Verath's small defensive fleet had been wiped out in the first hour of fighting. "All ships, this is Indomitable actual," Anne broadcast. "We are here for humanitarian rescue and defense of civilian populations. Rules of engagement: protect Verath lives, disable Kryn vessels where possible, destroy them if necessary. Show them what civilian ships can do." The human fleet moved in like a tidal wave. The cargo transports deployed their repair drones, but these drones were not repairing anything. They swarmed toward Kryn vessels in clouds of hundreds, each one carrying cutting tools that could slice through hull plating. The Kryn point defense systems were overwhelmed in seconds. The mining ships activated their rock-cutting lasers, focusing beams of coherent light across millions of kilometers. Kryn shields held for a moment, then failed. Ships split apart as laser fire carved through them with precision that came from years of cutting asteroids to exact specifications. The colony transports launched their shuttles, thousands of small craft descending toward Verath worlds to evacuate civilians. But they also deployed combat drones that the Kryn had not anticipated. Each transport carried manufacturing facilities, and those facilities had been busy during the 12-hour journey producing weapons, shields, and ammunition. And at the center of it all, the Indomitable demonstrated why the Council had been terrified of its existence. The massive ship's point defense grid lit up space, tracking and destroying incoming Kryn missiles with casual efficiency. Its main systems, designed for terraforming and planetary engineering, revealed their true nature. Beams that could reshape continents cut through Kryn battleships like they were paper. Kinetic weapons that could adjust asteroid orbits launched projectiles with such velocity that Kryn shields were meaningless. Within 3 hours, the battle was over. 57 Kryn warships destroyed or disabled. The remaining 13 fled, jumping to FTL in a disorganized retreat. 0 human vessels lost, minor damage to 12 ships. The Verath evacuation continued for 2 days. Human ships pulled millions of refugees from threatened worlds, transported them to safer systems, provided medical care, food, and shelter. The civilian fleet that the Council had worried was secretly military proved capable of massive humanitarian operations, while simultaneously being the most effective combat force the galaxy had seen in centuries. When the Council peacekeeping fleet finally arrived, they found human ships coordinating rescue operations, rebuilding damaged infrastructure, and establishing defensive perimeters around Verath worlds. The Kryn had been driven back completely. Speaker Talmuth stood before the Council in emergency session, watching recordings of the battle. A single human civilian ship, the Indomitable, had destroyed 19 Kryn warships on its own. The rest of the human fleet had performed with similar efficiency, and all of it was technically legal under the treaty that the Council had written. "We must acknowledge reality," Talmuth said quietly. The chamber fell silent. The military restriction treaty has failed, not because anyone violated it, but because we were too focused on preventing weapons and not focused enough on preventing capability. Patricia Foster sat calmly in the human delegation section, waiting. "I propose we dissolve the current military restrictions and establish a new framework," Talmuth continued. "One based on mutual defense rather than attempted containment. The humans have proven something important. Power cannot be restricted through legal language alone. It must be channeled through cooperation." The vote took 3 hours of debate. In the end, it passed by a narrow margin. The old treaty would be dissolved. A new galactic defense initiative would be formed, with voluntary participation from all species. The human civilian fleet would become the core of this new organization, training other species in the creative engineering that had made them so effective. 5 years later, Anne Rivers stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now officially designated as the flagship of the Galactic Defense Initiative. Human-designed vessels protected trade routes throughout Council space. The techniques Diana Webb and her team had developed were now used by 23 different species. Ambassador Patricia Foster had retired, satisfied with the new galactic order. Henry Brooks, now elderly but sharp as ever, occasionally consulted on diplomatic matters. Diana Webb led the Joint Engineering Council, overseeing collaborative ship design projects that combined the best ideas from multiple species. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Restricting human creativity only made it more dangerous. Channeling it toward mutual benefit made everyone safer. On Earth, the shipyards continued building vessels. Some were still called civilian ships. Some now carried military designations. It did not matter anymore. The distinction had always been artificial. What mattered was capability, and humanity had demonstrated that in abundance. The Indomitable moved through space, a symbol of what could be achieved when innovation was embraced rather than feared. Around it, hundreds of ships from dozens of species maintained formation, all of them designed with the same principle in mind. Find creative solutions, exploit every possibility, never accept limitations as permanent. The Council had wanted to prevent humanity from building warships. They had succeeded, technically. Humanity had not built warships. They had built something better. They had built the future.